The glass walls of Elena Marsh's corner office overlooked Manhattan like a kingdom spread beneath her feet. 52 floors above the noise and chaos, she existed in a world of silence, control, and absolute power. At 38, she had built Marsh Enterprises into a billion-dollar empire, tech innovations that changed industries, real estate ventures that reshaped skylines, and investment portfolios that made Wall Street analysts nervous. Her name commanded boardrooms. Her signature closed deals worth more than most people would earn in 10 lifetimes. But on New Year's Eve, as the city below her began to glow with celebration and possibility, Elena sat alone in her office, staring at a calendar that meant nothing to her. The building had emptied hours ago. Her assistant had left with apologetic eyes and gentle wishes for a happy new year. Wishes Elena had accepted with a polite smile that never reached her eyes. She had dismissed her driver for the evening, insisting she preferred to walk. It wasn't entirely a lie. She did prefer walking through the city at night when the streets belonged to strangers who didn't know her name or expect anything from her. But it was also easier than sitting in the back of a car with nothing but her reflection in the tinted windows and the uncomfortable awareness that she had nowhere urgent to be. Elena had received 17 dinner invitations over the past month. Business associates hoping to secure her favor. Competitors attempting to soften her through false friendship. A few former colleagues who remembered when she used to laugh more easily, before ambition consumed everything soft inside her. She had declined them all with practiced efficiency, offering excuses that were technically true but emotionally dishonest. She told them she had other commitments, prior engagements, important work that couldn't wait. What she didn't tell them was that she preferred the honesty of solitude to the performance of connection. The city had a different energy on New Year's Eve. Even from her office, she could feel it, the pulse of collective hope, the shared belief that midnight could somehow erase past mistakes and justify new beginnings. Elena had stopped believing in such things years ago. Time was merely a measurement to her now, deadlines and quarters and fiscal years. The turning of a calendar page held no magic, no promise. It was simply another day, another night, another opportunity to prove that she needed nothing and no one. But as the clock on her desk ticked past 7, something unfamiliar stirred in her chest. Not loneliness exactly. She had become too skilled at denying that, but a restless dissatisfaction, a quiet voice that whispered questions she usually drowned out with work. She had checked every email twice. Reviewed every document that needed her attention. Made every call that justified her presence in the office. There was nothing left to do except sit in the silence she had carefully constructed and admit that it felt heavier than usual tonight. Elena stood and gathered her coat, a tailored cashmere piece that cost more than most people's monthly rent. She turned off her computer, locked her office door, and rode the elevator down to the lobby in perfect silence. The security guard wished her a happy new year with genuine warmth, and she returned the sentiment with the same polite smile she gave everyone. Outside, the cold air hit her face like a slap of reality. The streets were crowded with people moving in groups, couples holding hands, families bundling children against the winter wind. Everyone seemed to belong to someone, to be heading somewhere that mattered. She walked without direction at first, letting the movement distract her from the thoughts that always grew louder in stillness. The city glittered around her. Lights strung across buildings, restaurants glowing with warmth, bars spilling laughter onto sidewalks. She passed couples taking selfies beneath street decorations, groups of friends toasting with champagne they'd smuggled out of parties, elderly couples walking slowly, their steps synchronized by decades of shared life. Elena kept her head down and her pace steady, a woman moving through the world but not quite part of it. After 30 minutes of aimless wandering, hunger announced itself with uncomfortable persistence. She hadn't eaten since a protein bar at lunch, too focused on closing a deal to notice her body's needs. Now, standing on a corner in Midtown, she realized that most sensible people had made reservations weeks ago. Most sensible people had plans. Most sensible people didn't wait until New Year's Eve to decide they wanted dinner in one of the busiest cities in the world. Elena pulled out her phone and opened the app she rarely used, the one that showed available tables at restaurants she could theoretically access. But tonight, the screen told a different story. Every upscale restaurant she tried showed the same message: fully booked, no availability, waitlist closed. She scrolled through options with growing frustration, her usual confidence beginning to crack. Money had always been the universal key, the solution to every inconvenience, the force that bent reality to her preferences. But tonight, it seemed, even her wealth couldn't manufacture space where none existed. She tried calling her assistant, then remembered it was New Year's Eve and the woman deserved her time off. She considered her options, ordering room service at a hotel, going home to her penthouse and its well-stocked but untouched kitchen, giving up on the idea of food altogether. But something stubborn inside her refused to retreat. She was Elena Marsh. She closed impossible deals. She negotiated with people who built nations. Surely she could secure a table at a restaurant. The Gilded Rose sat on a quieter street, its reputation built on old money and older traditions. Elena had attended 2 business dinners there over the years. Private rooms, carefully selected guests, conversations that shaped industries. She knew the owner by name, had donated to his daughter's charity fundraiser, had once helped him avoid a disastrous real estate investment. Surely that counted for something. The restaurant's entrance glowed with understated elegance. Brass fixtures polished to perfection, windows revealing warm light and white tablecloths and the comfortable joy of people who belonged. Elena pushed through the door, grateful for the warmth that wrapped around her like a promise. The hostess looked up with a professional smile that faltered slightly when she recognized who stood before her. "Ms. Marsh, good evening. How can I help you?" "Table for 1, Elena said simply, as if the request required no explanation. The hostess's smile became apologetic, almost pitying. "I'm so sorry, but we're completely booked tonight. It's New Year's Eve, we've been reserved for weeks." Elena felt something cold settle in her stomach. "I'm sure you can find something. A corner table. The bar." "I'm not particular. I truly apologize, but there's nothing available. Even our bar is at capacity. We have a strict fire code." "I know Richard personally," Elena interrupted, hearing the desperation in her own voice and hating it. "Perhaps you could check with him?" The hostess maintained her professionalism, but something shifted in her eyes, recognition of the awkwardness, the uncomfortable reality that power had limits. "Mr. Castellano is in the kitchen overseeing tonight's service. He asked not to be disturbed except for emergencies. But if you'd like to leave your number, I could have him call you tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" The word hung between them like failure. Elena forced another smile, this one brittle enough to shatter. "That won't be necessary. Thank you." She turned away before the pity in the hostess's eyes could sink deeper, before the reality of her situation could fully crystallize. Behind her, the restaurant hummed with warmth and connection. Families celebrating, couples toasting, friends laughing over shared plates and shared memories. And she stood outside of it all, powerful and wealthy and completely unable to buy her way in. Elena stood on the sidewalk outside the Gilded Rose, feeling the cold seep through her expensive coat. She had faced down hostile boards, negotiated with ruthless competitors, stood firm when men twice her age tried to intimidate her into silence. But this moment, standing alone on New Year's Eve, rejected by a restaurant hostess, felt like a different kind of defeat. It stripped away the armor she had spent years constructing and revealed something she had worked hard to ignore. Beneath the power and wealth and control, she was just a woman with nowhere to go and no one waiting for her. If you've ever felt invisible despite being seen by everyone, take a moment and share that feeling below. Sometimes our stories connect us more than our successes ever could. She was about to walk away when the door opened behind her. A young girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, burst onto the sidewalk with the uninhibited energy of childhood. She wore a red velvet dress that had clearly been chosen for this special occasion, her dark hair pulled back with clips that sparkled under the streetlights. Behind her, a man followed, mid-30s, wearing a sweater that had seen better days but was clean and carefully maintained. He had the slightly frazzled look of a parent managing a spirited child in a formal setting. "Mia, slow down," he called, his voice warm with patient exhaustion. "You can't just run outside without your coat." The girl spun around, grinning. "But Daddy, I wanted to see if it was snowing yet. You said maybe it would snow for the new year." The man caught up to her, draping a small coat over her shoulders with practiced efficiency. "I said maybe, which means probably not. Now back inside before you freeze." It was then that the girl noticed Elena standing there, and her eyes, bright with curiosity and completely free of judgment, fixed on the stranger with interest. "Are you waiting for someone?" Elena felt caught off guard by the directness, the lack of adult filters. "No, the restaurant is full." "It's New Year's Eve," the girl explained seriously, as if Elena might not know. "Everyone wants to eat together tonight. But we have an extra chair at our table." "Doesn't she, Daddy?" Mrs. Chun was supposed to come, but her grandson got sick. The man looked embarrassed, his hand moving to his daughter's shoulder in gentle restraint. "Mia, you can't just invite strangers to dinner." "Why not?" Mia asked with perfect childhood logic. "You always say we should be kind to people, especially on special nights. And she's all alone. Nobody should be alone on New Year's Eve." Elena felt something crack inside her chest, not breaking exactly, but shifting, like ice beginning to thaw. She looked at the man properly now, seeing the exhaustion that came from carrying more than one should have to carry, but also the gentleness in how he regarded his daughter, the quiet strength of someone who had learned to bend without breaking. His eyes met hers with apology and something else, a flash of recognition that maybe he understood loneliness better than most. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "She's right that we have an extra seat, but I'm sure you have your own plans." "I don't," Elena heard herself say before she could think better of it. "I don't have plans." The man studied her for a moment, and Elena had the uncomfortable sensation of being truly seen. Not her clothes or her confidence or her carefully maintained image, but something underneath all of that. Whatever he saw must have satisfied something in him, because he offered a small, genuine smile. "Then would you like to join us? I'm Marcus. This is my daughter Mia. And apparently, she's decided you're eating with us tonight." Mia beamed with the pride of someone who had solved a significant problem. "See? Now nobody has to be alone." Elena should have declined. Should have made a polite excuse and walked away to the safety of her penthouse and the solitude she understood. But something in the girl's absolute certainty that this was the right thing to do, something in the father's kind eyes and tired smile, made her hesitate. And in that hesitation, she found herself nodding. "I'm Elena," she said quietly. "And thank you." Mia grabbed her hand with the casual intimacy of a child who hadn't yet learned to fear strangers, pulling her toward the restaurant door. "Come on. Our table is by the window, and Daddy let me order the fancy bread." Marcus held the door open, and Elena stepped back into the warmth she'd been denied moments before. But this time, she wasn't entering as Elena Marsh, CEO and billionaire. She was simply a woman who had been invited to share a meal by people who owed her nothing and expected nothing in return. The hostess's eyes widened in surprise as they passed, but Mia was already leading Elena through the crowded restaurant with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where she belonged. Their table was small, tucked near a window that looked out onto the street now filling with evening revelers. It was set for 3, with a child's booster seat on one side and 2 adult chairs facing each other. The extra chair, meant for the absent Mrs. Chun, sat at an angle waiting. Mia climbed into her booster with practiced ease, then patted the empty chair beside her. "You can sit here, next to me. Daddy sits there so he can cut my meat if it's too hard." Elena lowered herself into the chair, feeling absurdly out of place in her designer coat among the simple comfort of this little family celebration. Marcus sat across from them, his eyes holding a mixture of amusement and something gentler, perhaps gratitude that his daughter's impulsive kindness was being accepted rather than rejected. "I should explain," Marcus said as he unfolded his napkin. "We do this every year, New Year's Eve dinner, just the 2 of us. It's become our tradition. This year, Mia insisted we invite our neighbor Mrs. Chun, but she called this afternoon to cancel. Mia was disappointed about the empty chair." "Now it's not empty," Mia announced happily, already reaching for the bread basket. "See, Daddy? I told you someone would need it." Elena watched the girl's uninhibited joy, the way she moved through the world assuming goodness and possibility. It was foreign and fascinating and made Elena acutely aware of how long it had been since she'd felt anything close to that kind of openness. A waiter appeared, his professional mask slipping slightly when he recognized Elena. She saw the question forming in his eyes. Why was Elena Marsh sitting at a modest table with people who were clearly not her usual company? She met his gaze with a level stare that discouraged inquiry, and he smoothly shifted into service mode. "Good evening. Can I get you started with drinks?" Marcus ordered water and a Shirley Temple for Mia, then looked at Elena with polite deference to her preference. She almost ordered her usual, a specific wine that cost more than this entire meal would, but something made her pause. That woman, the one who ordered expensive wine and controlled every detail, felt wrong for this moment. "Water is fine," she said simply. "Thank you." As the waiter left, Mia leaned toward Elena with conspiratorial interest. "What do you do?" Marcus gently intercepted. "Mia, that's not polite to ask right away." "It's all right," Elena said, surprising herself. She looked at the girl's open, curious face and made a choice. "I work with companies. I help them grow and succeed." "Like a teacher?" Mia asked. "Something like that," Elena agreed, finding the simplification oddly liberating. "My daddy is a teacher," Mia announced proudly. "He teaches high school history. And he coaches soccer, even though he says teenage boys smell bad after practice." Marcus laughed, the sound genuine and unguarded. "That's not exactly how I put it, but yes. I teach history and coach the junior varsity soccer team." Elena felt something shift in her understanding. A teacher. A single father. Someone who probably made in a year what she spent on a single business dinner. Yet sitting here, watching the easy warmth between father and daughter, she couldn't locate the superiority she usually felt around people with less money. Instead, she felt something closer to curiosity, perhaps even envy. History, she repeated. What period? American history, mostly. Though I prefer teaching about the ordinary people rather than the famous ones. The workers, the immigrants, the people who never made it into textbooks but whose lives shaped everything. He spoke with quiet passion, the kind that came from genuine belief rather than performance. I tell my students that history isn't about memorizing dates. It's about understanding that real people made choices, faced consequences, struggled with the same questions we still ask. Like what? Elena found herself asking. Like what makes a life meaningful? What we owe each other? How we define success? His eyes met hers with unexpected directness. Whether what we build lasts beyond us. The words landed somewhere deep in Elena's chest, touching questions she usually kept buried beneath spreadsheets and strategy meetings. Before she could respond, Mia interrupted with the perfect timing of a child unaware of adult undercurrents. Daddy always says the best stories are about regular people doing brave things. Not kings and queens. Not that kings and queens can't be interesting, Marcus amended with a smile. But yes, I think courage looks different in everyday life. It's the single mother working 2 jobs. The immigrant learning a new language. The person who chooses kindness when it would be easier to be cruel. Elena thought about her own life, the empire she'd built, the respect she commanded. Was any of it brave? Or was it simply the logical result of intelligence, opportunity, and relentless ambition? She had never considered herself cruel, but kindness required something she'd long ago decided was weakness, vulnerability. The waiter returned with their drinks and took their orders. Mia requested chicken fingers with the solemnity of someone making an important decision. Marcus ordered a pasta dish from the lower end of the menu. Careful, Elena noticed, not wasteful. When the waiter looked at her expectantly, Elena scanned the menu and chose something simple, not because she had to but because choosing the most expensive option suddenly felt like performing wealth rather than simply existing. After the waiter left, Mia sipped her Shirley Temple with delight, then fixed Elena with another direct question. Do you have a family? The question was innocent, but it hit like an accusation. Elena felt Marcus tense slightly, ready to redirect his daughter's curiosity. But Elena found herself answering honestly. No. No family. No one. Mia's eyes widened with concern. What about on Christmas? Who did you spend Christmas with? I worked, Elena said simply, because it was true and because any other answer would require explanations she didn't want to give. On Christmas. Mia looked horrified. But that's for family. Mia, Marcus said gently. Not everyone celebrates the same way. And some people's families live far away. He was offering her an exit, a socially acceptable explanation. But Elena didn't take it. I don't have family, she repeated quietly. My parents died when I was young. I was raised by an aunt who did her duty but didn't particularly want me. I learned early that I could only rely on myself. The silence that followed wasn't pitying exactly, but it held weight. Mia's face scrunched with the effort of understanding something beyond her experience. That's sad, she said finally, with the blunt honesty of childhood. Everyone should have someone. Mia, Marcus started, but Elena shook her head. She's right. It is sad. The admission surprised her, the ease with which it emerged. She had spent years telling herself that solitude was strength, that independence was victory. But sitting here, watching a father and daughter share the casual intimacy of people who truly knew each other, she couldn't maintain the fiction. I chose work instead of people. I told myself it was enough. Was it? Marcus asked quietly, his voice free of judgment. Elena looked at him, this stranger who taught history to teenagers, who raised a daughter alone, who probably worried about money and futures and all the ordinary struggles she had insulated herself from. And she answered truthfully. I don't know anymore. The food arrived, breaking the moment's intensity. Mia immediately dove into her chicken fingers with enthusiasm, offering Elena one with generous insistence. Elena accepted, finding the simple food more satisfying than she expected. They ate in comfortable quiet for a while, the restaurant's ambient noise filling the spaces between bites. Why do you eat alone on New Year's Eve? Mia asked eventually, ketchup on her chin. Don't you have friends? Mia, Marcus said with gentle exasperation. Enough interrogating our guest. But Elena found she didn't mind. There was something clarifying about Mia's questions. They cut through all the polite deflection adults use to avoid truth. I have colleagues. People I work with. But I'm not sure I have friends. Not real ones. She paused, considering. I think I forgot how to have them. Or maybe I never learned. It's easy, Mia assured her. You just have to be nice and share your toys and listen when people are sad. Marcus smiled softly at his daughter, then looked at Elena with understanding that felt uncomfortably perceptive. It's not that simple for adults. We build walls. We protect ourselves. Sometimes we do it so well that we forget we're lonely until we can't ignore it anymore. His words landed with precision, and Elena felt truly seen in a way that should have been threatening but instead felt like relief. Here was someone who understood, who maybe knew what it cost to survive certain kinds of pain. Were you always alone? Marcus asked carefully. Or did something happen? Elena considered not answering, retreating into the privacy she usually maintained. But something about this night, the unexpected invitation, the child's innocent directness, the strange safety of strangers who had no stake in her public image, made honesty feel possible. If this moment resonates with you, if you've ever built walls so strong you forgot what they were protecting you from, tap the like. No pressure. Just solidarity. There was someone, she said slowly. A long time ago. Before I became this. She gestured vaguely at herself, meaning the power, the wealth, the impenetrable armor. His name was David. We met in business school. He was brilliant and kind, and he saw me before I became successful. What happened? Mia asked softly, caught up in the story. I chose work, Elena said simply. Again and again. I missed dinners, canceled plans, worked through weekends. He said I was building walls. I said I was building a future. Eventually he stopped asking me to choose him, and I told myself it meant I'd been right all along, that work was more reliable than people. Were you right? Marcus asked. Elena looked down at her plate, seeing her reflection distorted in the polished silverware. No. I think I was terrified. My aunt always told me that love was a luxury for people who could afford vulnerability. She said I needed to be strong, independent, beyond need. So I became exactly that. And now I don't know how to be anything else. But you're here, Mia pointed out with child logic. You're having dinner with us. So maybe you're learning. The simple observation struck Elena with unexpected force. She was here. She had accepted an invitation from strangers, sat at their table, answered questions that exposed the loneliness she usually denied. Maybe that was learning. Maybe that was the first crack in armor that had become a prison. Maybe, Elena agreed softly. Maybe I am. They continued eating, the conversation shifting to lighter topics. Mia's favorite subjects in school, Marcus's most challenging students, the shows they watched and the books they read. Elena found herself relaxing in increments, her shoulders lowering from their habitually defensive height, her voice losing its corporate edge. She told them about the time she tried cooking and nearly set her penthouse on fire. Mia found this hilarious, insisting that everyone should know how to make at least spaghetti. My daddy makes the best spaghetti, Mia declared. With meatballs and garlic bread. You should come over and try it sometime. Mia, Marcus said gently. I'm sure Elena is very busy. I'd like that, Elena interrupted, surprising them both. If the invitation is genuine. Marcus studied her face for a moment, then nodded slowly. It is. Though I should warn you, our apartment is small, and dinner comes with homework supervision and debates about bedtime. That sounds. Elena paused, searching for the word. Normal. That sounds normal. Is normal good? Mia asked curiously. I think it might be, Elena said, realizing as she spoke that it was true. Normal sounded like relief. Normal sounded like belonging to something beyond quarterly earnings and board meetings. Dessert arrived, chocolate cake that Mia insisted they all share. As they passed forks and plates, Elena watched Marcus guide his daughter's enthusiasm with patient affection, wiping chocolate from her cheek, listening to her chatter about the new year with genuine interest. This was wealth, she realized. Not the numbers in her accounts or the properties bearing her name, but this, the simple, profound richness of being known and loved, of having someone whose happiness depended on your presence rather than your productivity. Daddy, Mia said suddenly, her voice dropping to a whisper loud enough for the whole table to hear. Can I tell you my New Year's wish? Of course, sweetheart. I wish that you could be really, really happy. Like before Mommy died. I know you're still sad sometimes when you think I'm sleeping. I wish someone could make you smile more. The words hung in the air, devastating in their honesty. Marcus's expression crumpled slightly before he composed himself, his hand reaching across the table to touch his daughter's cheek with infinite tenderness.
I am happy, Mia.
You make me happy every single day. I know, she said seriously.
But I'm your kid. That's different.
I want you to have grown up happy too. Like when someone wants to have dinner with you and talk about boring history stuff and watch you when they think you're not looking. Marcus flushed slightly, clearly uncomfortable with his daughter's precocious observation. But Elena found herself frozen, struck by the child's wish. Here was a girl who had lost her mother, who was being raised by a father doing his best with limited resources, and her deepest wish wasn't for toys or trips or things, it was for her father to feel joy again. When was the last time someone had wished for Elena's happiness? When was the last time she had even considered it a goal worth pursuing? That's a beautiful wish, Elena said softly, her voice rough with unexpected emotion. Your father is lucky to have you. I'm the lucky one, Marcus corrected, his eyes bright with love and grief and gratitude all tangled together. She's taught me more about life than I could ever teach her. Like what?
Elena asked.
Like how to keep going when everything falls apart. How to find joy in ordinary moments. How to believe in people even when the world gives you reasons not to. He looked at his daughter with such profound affection that Elena felt something in her chest begin to ache. Her mother died 3 years ago. Cancer. Quick and brutal. For a while, I didn't know how to keep breathing, let alone living. But Mia needed me. She needed ordinary days and school lunches and bedtime stories. So I learned to build a life out of small things. I'm sorry, Elena said, the words inadequate but genuine. That must have been devastating.
It was. It still is sometimes.
But Mia's right, I'm not just surviving anymore. I'm remembering how to actually live. He smiled at Elena, and she saw the difference between surviving and living written in his expression. Though apparently my daughter thinks I need help in that department. You just need to find someone who likes your boring history stuff, Mia insisted.
And who's nice.
And who makes you do your happy laugh instead of your polite laugh. There are different laughs? Elena asked, genuinely curious. Oh yes, Mia said seriously. Grown-ups have lots of fake sounds. Fake laughs for when something isn't really funny. Fake happy voices for when they're tired. Fake everything's fine when it's not. She's terrifyingly perceptive, Marcus admitted. Comes from spending too much time around adults, I think. She's learned to read what we're not saying. Elena thought about her own fake sounds, the polite laughter in meetings, the confident voice in presentations, the controlled calm when delivering bad news. How much of her life was performance? How much of her had become genuinely fake? What's your real laugh sound like? Mia asked Elena directly.
I don't know.
I don't think I've heard it in a long time. Then we should find it, Mia declared, as if this were a simple problem with an obvious solution. Everyone should know their real laugh. The waiter appeared to clear their dessert plates, and Elena noticed the restaurant had begun to shift its energy. Staff preparing for the midnight countdown, champagne being positioned at tables, the excitement building toward the arbitrary but meaningful moment when one year became another. Marcus checked his watch. 45 minutes until midnight. We usually walk to the park nearby to watch the fireworks from a distance. The official display is too crowded for us, but you can see it from the hill. Would you like to join us? The invitation was casual, but Elena understood its significance. He was offering her entry into their tradition, their private celebration. The old Elena would have declined, retreated to the safety of her penthouse and the solitude she understood. But that Elena had been standing alone outside a restaurant an hour ago, unable to buy her way into warmth. That Elena had been slowly dying without even noticing. Yes, she said simply. I'd like that very much. They gathered their coats, and Marcus insisted on paying the bill despite Elena's offer to cover it. You're our guest, he said firmly. And this is our tradition. You can get the next one. The casual assumption that there would be a next one struck Elena as both terrifying and wonderful. When was the last time someone had assumed her continued presence in their life? Outside, the cold had intensified, and the streets had grown more crowded. Mia walked between them, holding both their hands with the unconscious trust of a child who believed adults would keep her safe. Elena couldn't remember the last time she'd held someone's hand, not in the formal professional handshake way, but in this simple grounding connection. They walked through streets decorated with lights and hope, past groups celebrating and couples kissing and street vendors selling overpriced noisemakers. Mia chattered about school and friends and her plans for the new year, which included reading more books and learning to do a cartwheel and maybe getting a fish if her daddy decided fish weren't too much responsibility. Marcus walked with the relaxed confidence of someone who knew these streets, who belonged to this city in a way Elena, despite owning property worth millions here, never had. He pointed out small details: a bookstore that was struggling but still holding on, a community garden that neighborhood volunteers maintained, a mural painted by local kids. These were the things he noticed, not property values or development opportunities, but the human stories woven into concrete and glass. The park, when they reached it, was less crowded than the main celebration areas but still filled with people seeking the same thing: a view of the sky, a moment of collective hope, a chance to mark time's passage with someone who cared. Marcus led them to a spot on a hill that offered a clear view of the distant skyscrapers where the official fireworks would launch. "Best kept secret in the city," he said as they settled onto a bench. "Good view, no crushing crowds, and we can actually hear ourselves think." Mia immediately began playing with a small sparkler Marcus produced from his pocket, apparently another tradition. Elena watched the child twirl light through darkness, writing her name in temporary fire, wholly absorbed in the simple magic of it. "She's remarkable," Elena said quietly. "She is," Marcus agreed, his voice soft with love.
Though I'm biased.
"But yes, she's taught me that resilience looks different than I thought. It's not about being unbreakable. It's about breaking and somehow finding a way to keep going anyway." "Is that what you did?"
Elena asked.
"After your wife died?"
"I didn't have a choice. Mia needed me.
"But more than that, I needed her. She gave me a reason to get out of bed, to make breakfast, to pretend the world still made sense until eventually it started to again." He paused, watching his daughter with tender attention. "I think I'm a better person for having survived it.
More patient.
More grateful. More aware that nothing is guaranteed." "I've never had to survive anything like that," Elena admitted. "I've worked hard, fought battles, won and lost deals. But I've never had to face real loss because I've never let anyone close enough to lose." "That's a different kind of loss," Marcus observed. "Losing what you never let yourself have." His words struck deep, and Elena felt tears prick her eyes, unexpected, unwelcome, but undeniable. She blinked them back, but Marcus noticed. He didn't comment, didn't push, just sat with her grief for something she'd never known she was grieving.
"It's not too late," he said eventually. "To let people in.
To build something beyond work."
"I don't know how," Elena confessed.
"I've spent so long being self-sufficient that I don't know how to need anyone."
"It starts small," Marcus said.
"Saying yes to dinner with strangers. Admitting when you're lonely. Asking for help. Letting someone see you when you're not performing perfection." "That sounds terrifying." "It is," he agreed with a small smile. "But less terrifying than spending your life alone because you were too afraid to try." Mia ran back to them, her sparkler burned out, her face glowing with cold and happiness.
10 minutes until midnight.
"We have to make our wishes." "What are you wishing for?" Marcus asked his daughter. "It's secret," Mia said seriously. "But it's about you being happy. And maybe about getting that fish." Marcus laughed, a real, unguarded sound that made Elena understand what Mia meant about different laughs. This one came from deep inside, genuine and warm and completely unself-conscious. "What about you, Elena?"
Mia asked.
"What are you wishing for?" Elena looked at this child who had invited her to dinner without knowing her name or her net worth, at this man who had let a stranger into his carefully built life, at the city spread below them full of people marking time together. She thought about her empty penthouse, her impressive office, her enormous wealth that couldn't buy what she actually needed.
"I wish." She started, then stopped. What did she wish for?
What did she actually want beyond the next deal, the next acquisition, the next quarter's growth?
"I wish to be brave enough to change," she said finally.
To learn how to build a life instead of just a career.
"That's a good wish," Mia approved.
"Daddy says being brave means being scared but doing it anyway." Around them, the crowd began counting down. 60 seconds until midnight. 60 seconds until the arbitrary but powerful moment when people allowed themselves to believe in fresh starts and new beginnings. Elena found herself standing, joining Mia and Marcus as strangers around them counted down together.
50. 40. 30.
She thought about the year ending, all the deals closed, all the money made, all the hours spent alone in her office while life happened somewhere else.
20. 15. 10.
She thought about David, about the life she'd sacrificed for success, about all the dinners she'd missed and the connections she'd avoided.
5. 4. 3.
She thought about this evening, about a child's innocent invitation and a man's quiet kindness and how they'd given her something no amount of money could buy, a moment of genuine belonging.
2. 1.
Happy New Year. The crowd erupted in celebration. Fireworks exploded over the distant skyline, painting the darkness in temporary brilliance. Strangers hugged and kissed. Mia threw her arms around her father's neck, and Marcus held her tight, his eyes bright with the complicated joy of marking time without the person he'd expected to mark it with. And Elena stood there, tears finally streaming down her face, mourning and celebrating simultaneously. Mourning the years she'd wasted in isolation. Celebrating the possibility that maybe finally, she was ready to try something different. Marcus noticed her tears and gently touched her arm. "You okay?"
"No," Elena said honestly.
"But I think I want to be."
He understood.
She could see it in his eyes, the recognition of someone who knew what it meant to stand in ruins and choose to rebuild. He pulled a clean tissue from his pocket and offered it to her without commentary, a simple act of care that undid her completely. Mia, noticing Elena's tears, wrapped her small arms around Elena's waist in an unsolicited hug. "It's okay to cry on New Year's," she said seriously. "Daddy says tears mean you're feeling things, and feeling things is how you know you're really alive." Elena bent down and hugged the child back, something breaking and reforming inside her chest. "Your daddy is very wise." "I know," Mia agreed matter-of-factly. "Are you feeling alive now?" Elena laughed through her tears, a real laugh, the kind Mia had been talking about, the kind that came from somewhere genuine.
"You know what? I think I am."
They stayed in the park for another 20 minutes, watching the last of the fireworks fade and the crowd begin to disperse. Mia eventually grew tired, leaning against her father with the sudden exhaustion of a child who'd expended all her energy. Marcus lifted her easily, settling her against his shoulder where she dozed with complete trust. "We should get her home," he said apologetically. "But I meant what I said earlier.
About dinner.
If you'd like, here's my number." He fumbled for his phone one-handed, eventually managing to pull it out.
"No pressure.
"But if you want to continue learning how to build a life, we're usually home for dinner around 6. Elena took his phone and entered her number, then sent herself a text so she'd have his. "I'd like that. Fair warning, I'm probably terrible company. I don't know how to be around people normally." "Define normally," Marcus challenged with a slight smile. "We eat spaghetti on paper plates while Mia explains the complex social politics of second grade. It's not fancy." "It sounds perfect," Elena said, and meant it. They walked back toward the restaurant where the evening had begun, the streets still crowded but with the deflated energy that came after midnight when reality reasserted itself. At the corner where they would part ways, Marcus shifted Mia's weight and extended his free hand to Elena. "Thank you," he said simply.
"For saying yes. For joining us.
For being vulnerable enough to be real." Elena shook his hand, then found herself pulling him into a brief, awkward hug, complicated by the sleeping child between them but genuine despite its clumsiness. "Thank you for inviting me.
For seeing me.
For making me remember what it feels like to be human." When she finally walked away, heading toward her penthouse alone but somehow less lonely, Elena felt different. The buildings around her looked the same, her reflection in the shop windows showed the same expensive clothes and carefully maintained appearance, but something fundamental had shifted. She had spent years building an empire, proving she needed nothing and no one. But tonight, a child and her father had shown her the difference between being powerful and being whole. They had offered her something her wealth could never purchase, the simple, profound gift of being welcomed just as she was, without performance or pretense. If you've realized, even just a little, that connection matters more than accomplishment, that being known matters more than being admired, then subscribe.
Not for me. For you.
For the reminder that we all need to hear this again. Elena walked through Manhattan at 1 in the morning, still dressed in her expensive coat, still technically alone, but carrying something new inside her chest. Not happiness exactly, but its possibility. Not belonging yet, but the beginning of believing she could learn how to. When she reached her building, the doorman wished her a happy new year with his usual professional courtesy. She thanked him and on impulse asked his name, something she'd never done in the 5 years she'd lived here. "Robert, ma'am," he said, surprised. "Happy New Year, Robert," she said warmly. "I hope it's a good one for you and your family." His smile shifted from professional to genuine.
"Thank you, Ms. Marsh. Same to you."
In the elevator to her penthouse, Elena looked at her reflection in the polished walls. She looked tired, her makeup smudged from tears, her hair disheveled from the wind.
She looked real. She looked human.
For the first time in years, she looked like someone she might actually want to know. Her penthouse was exactly as she'd left it, immaculate, expensive, empty. The view from her floor-to-ceiling windows showed the city glittering below, all those lives happening without her. But unlike every other night, the sight didn't fill her with satisfaction at being above it all. Instead, she felt the pull to be part of it, to descend from her tower and walk among people who knew how to live rather than just achieve. Elena kicked off her shoes, poured herself a glass of water, and sat by the window. She pulled out her phone and looked at the text exchange with Marcus. Just his number and her test message, nothing profound. But it represented possibility. It represented a choice she could make tomorrow and the next day and the day after that, the choice to show up, to try, to let someone see her beyond the armor. She thought about her upcoming week, board meetings, strategy sessions, acquisition negotiations. The same calendar that had defined her for years. But now, woven into it, was a simple dinner invitation. Spaghetti on paper plates while a 7-year-old explained the complex social politics of second grade. It shouldn't have mattered. It was one meal with strangers who had nothing to offer her professionally. But sitting alone in her expensive penthouse at 2 in the morning, Elena understood that it mattered more than anything on her calendar. It mattered because it was real. It mattered because it asked nothing of her except her presence. It mattered because for the first time in longer than she could remember, someone had wanted her company not for what she could do or provide, but simply because she'd been standing alone and they thought everyone deserved to be included. Elena stayed by the window until the city's lights began to fade into dawn. She didn't sleep, but it wasn't the usual insomnia of racing thoughts and unfinished business. Instead, she sat with possibility. She sat with the uncomfortable awareness that she had been half alive for years, operating in the world but not truly participating in it. She sat with grief for what she'd lost by choosing safety over connection. And she sat with hope, fragile, uncertain, but undeniably present, that maybe it wasn't too late to learn how to really live. When her phone buzzed with the first work email of the new year at 6 in the morning, Elena looked at it for a long moment before setting the phone aside. For the first time in her professional life, she let an email go unanswered. Not forever, not as some grand rebellion, but just for now. Just for this moment where she was choosing to sit with herself, with her feelings, with the uncomfortable recognition that she had to change if she wanted her life to feel like more than an impressive accomplishment. Later, she would shower and dress and return to being Elena Marsh, CEO. She would attend her meetings and close her deals and maintain the empire she'd built. But underneath it, something fundamental had shifted. She had learned in one unexpected evening that power and wealth and success were hollow without connection. That being strong didn't mean being alone. That the life she'd been so proud of building was actually a beautiful prison she'd constructed to protect herself from the very thing she most needed, to be seen, known, and welcomed by people who wanted nothing from her except her genuine self. As the sun rose over Manhattan, Elena made a decision. She would go to dinner with Marcus and Mia. She would learn to make spaghetti and listen to stories about second-grade politics and practice her real laugh. She would let them see her struggle and stumble as she learned how to be a person instead of just a professional. She would risk the vulnerability she'd spent her life avoiding because the alternative, continuing to live in her tower of isolation, had finally become more terrifying than the prospect of change. It wouldn't be easy. She would probably fail repeatedly, retreating into work when emotions became too uncomfortable, hiding behind her armor when vulnerability felt too dangerous. But she would keep trying because a child named Mia had decided nobody should be alone on New Year's Eve, and a widowed teacher named Marcus had been brave enough to let a stranger into his carefully rebuilt life, and together they had shown Elena something she'd forgotten she was missing. The new year had begun. Not with resolutions or grand pronouncements, but with a quiet, profound shift. Elena Marsh, who had built an empire alone, was finally ready to learn how to build a life with others. The journey would be harder than any business deal she'd ever negotiated. It would require more courage than any boardroom battle she'd ever fought. But sitting in her empty penthouse at dawn, still wearing last night's clothes, tears dried on her cheeks and hope flickering fragile in her chest, Elena understood that it was the only journey that actually mattered. She picked up her phone and before she could overthink it, sent a text to Marcus. "Thank you for last night. For everything. I'd love to come for spaghetti. Let me know when." His response came 30 minutes later, probably sent while making breakfast for Mia, "This Saturday at 6. Bring nothing. Just yourself. That's enough. Just yourself. That's enough." Elena read those words again and again, letting them sink into places that had been hollow for too long. She had spent her entire adult life trying to be more than enough, more successful, more powerful, more untouchable. But here was someone saying that she, just as she was, without the armor and accomplishments, was sufficient. It was terrifying. It was liberating. It was, she realized, exactly what she needed to hear. Elena saved the text, then finally stood and walked to her bedroom to rest. She had work to do later, a company to run, an empire to maintain. But she also had spaghetti dinner on Saturday. She also had a little girl who had reminded her that kindness was simple and necessary. She also had a man who had survived devastating loss and still believed in showing up for life. And maybe, just maybe, she had the beginning of something she'd never had before, a chance to be part of something real, something that couldn't be measured in quarterly earnings or property values or market share, but in shared meals and honest conversations and the slow, difficult, beautiful work of letting people see you and choosing to stay anyway. As Elena finally closed her eyes against the morning light, she felt something she hadn't felt in longer than she could remember, genuine anticipation for the future. Not for the next deal or acquisition or triumph, but for Saturday at 6. For spaghetti on paper plates. For the complex social politics of second grade. For learning her real laugh. For the terrifying, necessary work of becoming fully human. Outside her window, the city continued its endless motion. People going to work, children heading to school, couples having coffee, strangers becoming friends. And for the first time in years, Elena Marsh wanted to be part of it. Not above it in her tower, not separate from it in her success, but genuinely, messily, vulnerably part of the beautiful, complicated, essential work of being alive and connected and real. The new year had begun. And finally, so had Elena's actual life.